Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey into the frozen heart of Canada, through forgotten corners, isolated small towns, endless wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing, real, and terrifying true New Year's Eve horror stories ever reported. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real, documented encounters from ordinary people who welcomed the new year and never forgot what followed. From snowbound highways to celebrations that turned silent, from warm homes to darkness waiting outside. Tonight, you will hear horrors that refuse to stay buried. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Canada, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan McLeod, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2016, in Northern Ontario. I was 28 then, working night shifts as a volunteer fire dispatcher in a town so small, it barely showed up on maps. New Year's Eve was usually quiet for us. Drunk calls, fireworks complaints, the occasional stranded driver. Nothing serious. That night, snow fell thick and heavy, swallowing sound, turning the world into something soft and wrong. At 11:40 p.m., I poured myself burnt coffee and stared out the station window. The forest beyond the parking lot looked closer than usual, pressed up against the glass like it was listening. I remember feeling uneasy for no reason, like I was being watched by something patient. 10 minutes before midnight, the radio crackled alive. A woman's voice came through, thin, shaking, asking for help. She didn't scream. She whispered. She said she was lost on a logging road and that something else was counting down with her. Behind her voice, faintly, I heard another sound. Breathing. Slow. Close. Waiting. I asked the woman for her name. She paused too long before answering, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Finally, she whispered, "Claire." My name is Claire. Her signal crackled, cutting in and out. She said she'd been driving home from a New Year's party when her GPS froze and rerouted her onto an unmarked logging road. Her car slid into a snowbank 10 minutes earlier. The engine still ran, but she was afraid to turn the headlights off. When I asked what she meant by something counting down, her breathing sped up. "I hear it," she said. "Not loud, just numbers, every minute, like it's excited." I strained to listen. Under the static, there it was, a low, rhythmic sound. Not quite a voice, not quite mechanical. A pause. Then another faint sound, closer to her microphone. Crunching snow. Claire said she'd seen movement beyond her windshield. Tall. Too tall. Standing just outside the reach of her headlights. It didn't rush her. It waited. And then, calmly, it whispered, 10. I told Claire to stay in the car and keep the doors locked. I alerted the nearest patrol and marked her last known coordinates, though the signal kept drifting like something was interfering with it. She tried to stay calm, but her voice kept breaking, especially every time the thing outside spoke again. 9. This time, I heard it clearly. Not human. Too steady. Too calm. Claire said the shadow moved closer whenever a number was spoken. It didn't rush. It circled her car slowly, footsteps crunching deliberately through the snow, always staying just beyond the headlights. She described its legs bending the wrong way when it walked, like it was learning how to move. I asked her to turn on her interior light so she wouldn't be sitting in total darkness. She did, and immediately gasped. "There's frost forming on the inside of the windshield," she whispered, like it's breathing cold. Then the radio crackled violently. 8. Claire started crying, begging me not to let the line go dead. I promised help was coming, even as the signal strength dropped again. At 11:55 p.m., the patrol unit radioed back. They couldn't find the road. The coordinates led to a stretch of forest that hadn't had an active logging route in over 20 years. No tire tracks, no sign of recent travel. Just untouched snow and trees standing like silent witnesses. When I told Claire this, she went quiet. Not disconnected, just silent. I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast, like she was trying not to scream. Then she whispered, "It's right in front of the hood now." I asked her what it looked like. She hesitated. "It doesn't have a face," she said. "Just a smooth shape where one should be. But it knows I'm looking at it." Another number came through the radio, louder than before. 5. The forest behind the station windows suddenly felt too close. I realized, with a sick drop in my stomach, that Claire's countdown wasn't matching the clock. It wasn't counting down to midnight. It was counting down to her. I checked the wall clock again. 11:57 p.m. Claire whispered that the thing had stopped moving. It just stood there, inches from her bumper, close enough that frost bloomed wherever its breath touched the metal. Her windshield cracked softly, thin spiderweb lines spreading outward. "Ethan," she said, using my name for the first time. "It's smiling." I don't know how, but I can feel it smiling. Another number echoed through the radio, slow and deliberate. 4. I told her to honk the horn, to flash the headlights, anything to scare it off. She tried. The horn died mid-blare, like the sound had been swallowed. The headlights flickered, then went dim. Outside her car, the forest answered with silence so deep it rang in my ears. She said she could see its hands now. Too many joints, fingers bending backward, pressing gently against the hood as if testing how strong it was. Like it was curious how long she'd last. "Ethan," she whispered again, "if I don't make it, please don't let it count with someone else." At 11:59 p.m., the radio feed spiked with static so loud I had to rip my headset off. When the noise settled, Claire was sobbing uncontrollably. "It's leaning down," she said. "It's so close I can feel it through the glass." I told her to start praying, screaming, doing anything to keep herself focused. She laughed weakly instead, a broken, hysterical sound. "It already knows how this ends," she said. "It's been here before." Then, clear as a bell, right beside her voice, came the next number. 2. The patrol unit called in again. They finally found tire tracks, fresh ones, leading off the main road. But they didn't go far. The tracks stopped abruptly in the middle of the forest, like the car had simply been lifted straight up. Claire gasped sharply. "It's opening the door," she whispered. I shouted her name. 1. Her scream cut off exactly as the clock struck midnight. The line went dead. Not static, not a disconnect tone. Just silence so complete it felt intentional, like something had pressed a finger over the world itself. I kept calling Claire's name, my voice echoing uselessly through the headset. At 12:03 a.m., a new transmission came through. It wasn't Claire. The voice was deeper, calmer, and impossibly close to the microphone, as if it were standing right beside her abandoned phone. 0 has passed, it said. Thank you for waiting with her. I froze. My hands wouldn't move. My mouth went dry. Then it did something worse. It mimicked Claire's voice perfectly. Her fear, her cadence, even the way she said my name. Ethan, it whispered sweetly. You promised you wouldn't let the line go dead. Behind the voice, I heard distant fireworks, celebrations echoing from towns miles away. Humanity welcoming the new year, unaware of what had just been taken. The radio clicked once, then silence returned. Search crews found Claire's car at dawn. It sat neatly on the logging road, doors closed, engine cold, buried halfway in snow like it had been there for weeks. No footprints around it, no signs of struggle, no damage, except the hood. Deep into the metal, pressed hard enough to warp steel, were 5 elongated handprints, fingers bent backward at impossible angles. Inside the car, her phone lay on the passenger seat. The screen was cracked, frozen on a voice memo time-stamped 12 a.m. No audio played, just a faint background noise the text couldn't identify. They never found Claire. But every New Year's Eve since then, just before midnight, our station receives a single incoming call from an unlisted number. No voice, no breathing, only counting, always starting at 10. I quit the dispatcher job after the 3rd year, but I still hear it sometimes, even without the radio. Waiting, patient, counting down to someone new. I tried to move on after leaving the station. New city, new job, no radios, no night shifts. I told myself distance would break whatever connection I had to that call. It didn't. Every New Year's Eve, the same symptoms return. My hearing sharpens, background noise fades. I start noticing rhythms. Clocks ticking too loudly, footsteps syncing with seconds, elevators chiming just before the minute changes. 3 years after I quit, I was alone in my apartment on December 31st, watching the city lights through my window. At 11:50 p.m., my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I didn't answer. I couldn't. A voicemail appeared seconds later, even though the phone never rang. The audio was only 10 seconds long. No voice. Just a sound I recognized instantly. Breathing. Slow, close, then a faint whisper, perfectly calm. 10. I deleted the voicemail, smashed the phone, sat shaking in the dark while fireworks exploded outside, people cheering for a future that suddenly felt very short. Last year, I finally listened all the way through. I didn't wait for midnight. I didn't wait for courage. At 11:30 p.m., when the voicemail notification appeared again, I pressed play. The counting continued, steady, patient, inevitable. But this time, there was something new. Between each number, I heard another sound layered beneath the breathing. A second voice, softer, broken, Claire's voice. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't begging. She was counting too, out of sync, like she was trying to warn someone. When the message reached 1, my apartment lights flickered, and frost crept along the inside of my window glass, blooming in delicate patterns shaped like fingers. The voicemail ended before 0. I don't know if that means I was spared, or if it means I'm still being saved for later. It's New Year's Eve again soon, and somewhere, something is already counting. My name is Lucas Bennett, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2019, in a quiet suburb outside Calgary, Alberta. I was 32, newly divorced, and trying to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I could still enjoy a night out. My friend Mark invited me to a New Year's house party hosted by one of his co-workers. Nothing wild, just drinks, music, and a countdown to distract us from the cold. The neighborhood was strange the moment we arrived. Every house looked occupied, lights glowing warmly behind frosted windows. But the street itself was silent. No laughter, no fireworks, no movement. Mark joked that everyone inside must be serious partiers. The house we entered smelled like pine cleaner and old smoke. Dozens of people stood around the living room, smiling, holding drinks, swaying slightly to music that felt a second too slow. They all wore neutral expressions. Pleasant, polite, empty. Someone handed me a glass before I could refuse. "Don't worry," she said softly. "We'll all celebrate together." Her smile never reached her eyes. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Parties can feel awkward when you don't know anyone. Still, something was wrong. No one checked their phones. No one asked what time it was. The music looped the same slow, distorted track, like it was trapped in a shallow breath. When I tried to talk to people, they responded politely but vaguely, never asking questions back. It felt like speaking to mannequins that had memorized a few social phrases. I asked Marks where the bathroom was. He stared at me blankly for a full second too long before pointing down the hallway. "After midnight," he said, then laughed like it was a joke. The hallway stretched farther than it should have. Doors lined both sides, all closed. From behind them, I heard faint murmuring, dozens of voices whispering the same phrase in overlapping tones. Almost time. Almost time. When I turned back toward the living room, I realized something terrifying. There were no windows anymore, just walls where the outside world should have been. And somewhere in the house, a voice calmly announced, 10 minutes until the new year. I checked my phone. No signal. No Wi-Fi. The time read 11:12 p.m., and it didn't change no matter how long I stared at it. I refreshed the screen again and again, my thumb growing slick with sweat. But the minute hand refused to move. Back in the living room, the crowd had grown denser. People stood closer together now, shoulders brushing, bodies swaying in perfect, synchronized rhythm. Their smiles were wider, stretched thin like masks pulled too tight. A man beside me leaned in and whispered, "Isn't it nice when time finally stops rushing you?" I pulled away, heart hammering. The front door was gone. In its place stood a wall covered in framed photos. Party photos, hundreds of them. In every picture, I saw the same living room, the same decorations, the same smiling crowd. But the people were different. Different clothes, different hairstyles, different decades. In the oldest photo, faded and yellowed, the date in the corner read, December 31st, 1974. And there, standing near the couch, was a younger version of the man who'd just spoken to me. I found Mark near the kitchen, standing stiffly by the counter, his drink untouched. "Mark," I said, gripping his arm. "We need to leave, now." He looked down at my hand like he'd forgotten what it was. Then his eyes focused just for a moment, and fear cracked through his expression. "I tried," he whispered. "I really tried." He told me he'd been to this party once before. 10 years earlier, same house, same people, same music. He'd escaped because someone distracted the host just long enough for him to slip out. "They don't like it when you miss the countdown," he said. "They need everyone present." I asked who they were. Mark shook his head. "I don't know. But when midnight hits, you don't age anymore. You don't leave. You just stay." The voice echoed through the house again, louder this time. 5 minutes until the new year. Every guest turned their head toward the sound in perfect unison and smiled. The decorations began to change as the minutes passed. Streamers sagged, colors dulling like they were leaching into the walls. Balloons shriveled slightly with each announcement, as if time was pressing in on the house from all sides. 4 minutes, the voice said. A woman near the couch started crying quietly, though her face never lost its smile. I realized then that some of the guests knew exactly what was happening and couldn't stop it. I tried every door in the hallway, bedrooms, closets, even a door that should have led to the basement. Each one opened into another version of the living room, like the house was folding in on itself. Mark grabbed my jacket. "If we run during the countdown, they'll notice," he whispered. "You have to leave between numbers. Between numbers." My heart pounded as the voice called out, 3 minutes. I scanned the room desperately, watching for anything out of place. That's when I noticed one guest near the back, an older woman who wasn't smiling at all. She was watching the clock. I pushed through the crowd toward the woman. Unlike the others, she looked solid, real. Her eyes were sharp with urgency. "You still feel time, don't you?" she whispered. I nodded. "I missed my chance in 1989, she said. "But you haven't yet." The voice boomed again. 2 minutes until the new year. The woman pointed toward the coat rack by the wall. Hanging there was a single set of keys, swaying gently even though no air moved in the room. "That door opens only once per year," she said, "right after the word 1 ends, but before 0 begins." Mark squeezed my shoulder. "Don't look back," he said quietly. "That's how they keep you." The countdown continued. 1 minute. The music stopped. Every eye in the room locked onto me. The keys began to rattle violently, and for the first time, I heard something behind the walls. Scratching, like fingernails desperate to get in. The voice stretched the word 1 unnaturally long, like it was savoring the moment. I counted in my head, waiting for the tiny space between breaths. The instant the word ended, I lunged for the keys. Hands grabbed at my jacket, my arms, my throat. Their grip was cold and dry, like skin that hadn't seen blood in years. I didn't look at their faces. I didn't look back. The keys slid into the lock by themselves. The door tore open, not into the snowy street, but into pure darkness that smelled like cold air and freedom. I felt Mark shove me forward with all his strength. "Go!" he shouted. As I fell through, the voice screamed for the first time, its calm cracking into something furious and hungry. 0. The door slammed shut behind me. I hit frozen pavement hard, gasping. Fireworks exploded overhead. People cheered in nearby houses. The world rushed back in all at once. Behind me, the house was dark, silent, and completely gone. Police didn't believe my story. The address didn't exist. The lot where the house should have been was empty, snow-covered, untouched. No foundation, no footprints, no evidence anyone had been there. Mark was never found. I searched for him online, through old records, social media, anything. I only found one thing. A photo from a New Year's Eve party in 2009. Same living room, same decorations. Mark stood near the back, smiling politely, holding a drink he never lifted to his lips. Every year since, I avoid parties. I stay home with the lights on, watching the clock, because sometimes, just before midnight, I hear music drifting faintly through my walls, slow, distorted, waiting. And when the final seconds approach, I swear I can hear a familiar voice in the distance, cheering softly, trapped forever between 1 year and the next. The next New Year's Eve, I couldn't resist checking the neighborhood. I parked across the street from where the house should have been, flashlight in hand, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every house was normal, lights glowing, neighbors chatting, children laughing. The street seemed safe, mundane. But then I heard it. Music. Slow, distorted, barely audible. I froze. It came from the empty lot. The sound of laughter followed, faint but clear, layered with whispers repeating one phrase over and over. Almost time, almost time. I scanned the snow. Nothing moved, no footprints, no shadows. But I knew. I could feel it. The house existed somewhere else now, just beyond perception. Every New Year's Eve, it moved, searching for the next person who would hear the countdown, who would be lured inside. I swallowed hard, realizing Mark hadn't just vanished. He had been taken by something patient, ancient, that waited in the quiet, measuring the curious and the bold. I returned home, shaking, and locked every door and window. But when the clock struck midnight, I heard it. Not music, not whispers, not even the faintest knock. It was counting. 10, 9, 8. I froze. The voice wasn't on the phone or outside. It was inside my apartment, quiet but unmistakable. I could hear it echo in my bones. My hands trembled on the table as I realized that the house didn't care about physical space. It didn't care about reality. It only needed attention. I don't answer my door anymore. I don't leave my apartment after dark in December. But each year, I know the sound is coming. Patient, eternal, waiting for someone who dares to celebrate the new year alone, to hear the faint echo of a party that never ends. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, I swear I hear Mark laughing behind me, trapped forever, smiling politely, holding a drink he never lifts to his lips. My name is Sophie Daniels, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2018, in rural Quebec. I had just left my cousin's New Year's party, the roads slick with ice and snow. The highway was nearly empty, just the crunch of my tires against frozen asphalt and the occasional distant firework. I was tired, but my parents insisted I didn't stay overnight at the party. Driving alone didn't bother me, at least not yet. Around 11:45 p.m., I saw her. A young woman standing on the shoulder, coat soaked, hood pulled low, thumb raised. Her figure was almost too still, perfectly vertical in the headlights. The snow fell harder, blurring the edges of the road, but she didn't flinch. Something about her presence felt wrong. I slowed and pulled over, telling myself I couldn't leave someone alone in this weather. Her eyes reflected the headlights, a bright, unnatural green. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just got in, leaving a cold gust of air that smelled faintly of decayed leaves. The ride began silently. I tried making small talk, asking her name, but she only shook her head slightly, her breath fogging in the cold car. Every mile we drove, the snow grew heavier, the trees leaning closer, as if the road itself were funneling us somewhere. I checked my rearview mirror and froze. Her reflection was wrong. Not her face, her eyes. They blinked too slowly, almost inhumanly, and the green glint seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the car engine. You don't live around here, do you? I asked. She finally spoke, her voice calm and melodic, yet distant. No, I've been waiting for tonight. I swallowed. My hand tightened on the steering wheel. Then, faintly, I heard another sound from the back seat, a whisper that wasn't hers. Almost midnight. I spun in my seat, but the back was empty. My pulse raced, every nerve screaming that something had already entered my car, unseen, waiting. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. The road was quiet, the snow muffling everything, and the headlights cast long, distorted shadows across the car interior. But the feeling of being watched never left. I glanced over at her. She was still silent, her eyes fixed on the dark forest outside. Then I noticed the rearview mirror again. Her reflection wasn't alone. A shadow crouched just behind her seat, tall, thin, and featureless, except for faint, glowing eyes. Every time I looked directly, it vanished. but the feeling of cold dread lingered, crawling across my skin. I pressed harder on the accelerator, trying to get past the stretch of forest that felt endless. She finally spoke again, whispering without turning to me. "The highway remembers who rides with me." I asked what she meant, but her words were swallowed by the wind as it rattled the car frame. My heart hammered as I realized I had no way to escape until the highway ended, or until midnight arrived. The digital clock on my dashboard read 11:57 p.m., and the forest seemed to grow darker with each passing second. Every tree outside leaned closer, their bare branches scratching against the windows like fingers trying to get in. I wanted to ask her to get out, to leave, to end this nightmare. But something held me back. The air in the car had grown unnaturally cold. Frost began forming on the edges of the windshield, spreading slowly, creeping inward like icy fingers. She finally turned her head to me, and my stomach dropped. Her face was shifting, not fully human. Skin pale, almost translucent. Her eyes still glowed green, but faint black veins pulsed from them like roots digging into her skull. "The countdown is almost mine," she whispered. Her lips didn't move fully in sync with her words. And then I heard it again. A soft, guttural voice from the back seat. 10, 9. I slammed on the brakes, my car fishtailing on the ice, heart pounding as the forest closed in around me. The tires skidded on the ice, and I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I tried to scream, but the cold air from the vents froze my throat. The whispering voice continued, faint but deliberate. 8, 7. Her head tilted unnaturally, the angle impossible for a human neck. I caught glimpses of the shadow in the back seat, moving independently of her. It wasn't just watching. It was learning, adapting, predicting. I forced myself to focus on the road. Every tree seemed to stretch taller, leaning closer as if pressing down on the car. I glanced again in the rearview mirror, and the shadow crouched closer, its glowing eyes sharper now, boring into me. The hitchhiker spoke again, her voice eerily calm. "Midnight chooses who stays and who leaves. You're almost at your chance." Chance? I didn't understand. But my pulse told me it wasn't a choice. It was a test. A game with rules I had yet to learn. And the seconds were slipping faster than the icy wheels beneath me. 11:59 p.m. The numbers echoed again, louder this time. 6, 5. My vision tunneled, heart racing, mind screaming to stop the car. The tires skidded once more as if the ice itself were alive, pulling me toward some unseen destination. The hitchhiker leaned closer, her cold breath brushing my cheek. I could feel her smiling, but her lips didn't move fully. The shadow behind her now stretched along the seat, fingers bending backward in ways that made my stomach turn. "I can save you," she whispered, "but only if you act before the final second." Before the final second. I realized I had to move now, or I'd be trapped, like the others she'd collected over the years. The rearview mirror shimmered unnaturally. The shadow's eyes glowed brighter. The air thickened, as if the car itself were filled with frozen smoke. I swallowed, gripped the wheel, and aimed for the side road that appeared briefly through the dense trees, a narrow chance to escape the countdown. I swerved onto the narrow side road, tires crunching over ice and snow. The shadow in the back seat lurched violently, like it was straining to reach me, but it couldn't move fast enough. The hitchhiker's calm voice cut through the roaring of my engine. Almost midnight. The trees on either side leaned closer, branches scraping against the windows like skeletal fingers. Every passing second made the car feel smaller, tighter, as if the forest itself were compressing reality. I glanced at the clock. 11:59:45 p.m. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then it happened. The rearview mirror flashed, the shadow had vanished. My stomach dropped. I wasn't relieved. I could sense it, coiled somewhere deeper in the car, watching. I pressed the accelerator harder, following the faint glow of streetlights that appeared like distant stars through the storm. The hitchhiker finally smiled fully, her teeth pale and sharp, and whispered, "Now you'll see if you can leave." Before 0. The seconds blurred. 11:59:50. 11:59:55. I could hear my own heartbeat over the storm. Then a loud crack echoed as a branch slammed against the hood, startling me so badly I nearly lost control. The hitchhiker leaned in, her eyes glowing fiercely. "Zero doesn't forgive hesitation," she said softly, almost like a lullaby. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, the frost inside the car beginning to spread again, curling along the dashboard and vents. A faint whisper returned from the back seat, counting along with the clock. 4, 3. The numbers were deliberate, patient, inhuman. Every sound in the car amplified, the crunch of snow beneath the tires, the creak of the steering column, even my own breath, melding into a symphony of dread. I slammed the brakes briefly, enough to correct the skid. Then I floored it again. I didn't know if I was running toward safety or straight into the trap. The side road seemed endless, the snow blinding, the forest pressing closer with each heartbeat. The clock ticked down its final seconds. 11:59:57. 11:59:58. I could hear the faint whisper behind me, counting along in perfect sync with my pulse. The hitchhiker's smile widened impossibly, sharp teeth glinting under the dim light of the dashboard. I glanced back. The shadow was gone again, replaced by a reflection of my own terrified face. But then the seat creaked. A hand, not human, too long, with unnatural joints, rested on the headrest behind me. I froze. My foot hovered over the brake and accelerator. The voice whispered softly, "1 second." Everything slowed. The forest outside seemed to hold its breath. My car skidded slightly, snow spraying like icy shards. The hitchhiker's voice, calm and melodic, said, "This is your choice. Move or stay." I floored the accelerator. The icy road blurred beneath me. The headlights pierced through the swirling snow, and the side road stretched forward like a tunnel of light and shadow. The final second slipping away. The moment the clock hit 12 a.m., everything changed. The hitchhiker screamed, a sound both human and impossible, echoing in my skull. The icy frost inside the car vanished instantly, replaced by suffocating warmth, like being underwater. I glanced behind me. The seat was empty, the shadow gone. The forest stretched normally again, the trees at a normal distance, the snow soft and quiet. I was alone, alive. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, my own reflection grinned back at me. Not me, but something older, darker, with green eyes that pulsed faintly in the dim light. I slammed the car into a side ditch, shaking, realizing I had escaped physically. But a part of me, my fear, my curiosity, my heartbeat, was trapped on that road, still counting, still waiting for the next person. I never pick up hitchhikers again. I never drive alone on New Year's Eve. But every year, in the quietest moments, I can still hear faint counting in my skull. 10, 9, 8. My name is Ethan Clark, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2020, deep in the woods of northern Ontario. A group of friends and I rented a remote cabin for the holiday. Just us, snow, and the promise of a quiet celebration. The drive-in had been treacherous. winding through forests so dense the headlights barely cut through. By the time we arrived, darkness had swallowed the entire road. The cabin was quaint, isolated, and perfect. At least, that's what we told ourselves. Inside, the air smelled of pine and old wood. Fireplaces crackled, casting flickering shadows across the walls. We laughed, drank, and decorated for midnight, oblivious to the forest beyond the windows. But by 10 p.m., strange things began. Doors that had been closed earlier were slightly ajar. Footsteps echoed from upstairs when no one was there. And outside, the snow seemed to glisten unnaturally, reflecting movement that didn't match anything living. I thought it was nerves, until I saw the first figure standing at the tree line. A man in old-fashioned clothing, watching. Just watching. By 11 p.m., the cabin had taken on a different feel. Shadows seemed longer, stretching unnaturally across the floorboards. Every laugh echoed strangely, as if someone else was repeating it just behind us. I went to check the back door. The snow outside was pristine, except for footprints that weren't ours. They formed a perfect circle around the cabin, stopping abruptly at the tree line where the figure had stood earlier. When I called for my friends, their voices sounded muffled, distant. Mark, the prankster of the group, swore he didn't hear me. But I could see him from the corner of my eye, standing by the fireplace, frozen, staring at the window as if hypnotized. Then the whispering started. Faint at first, like wind through the trees. But it grew louder with each second, repeating over and over. Midnight is coming, and the cabin remembers. I backed away, heart hammering, realizing this wasn't the playful isolation we had imagined. Something was already inside. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just nerves. But the whispering persisted, coming from every corner of the cabin at once. Each time I turned, I could see shadows shifting against the walls, as if something was pacing just out of the corner of my vision. My friends were oblivious, or pretending to be. They laughed nervously, drank more, and teased me about being jumpy. But I could feel eyes on us. Every time I glanced toward the windows, the tree line seemed closer. That figure was moving, though impossibly slow, just beyond the snow's edge. I went upstairs to check the bedrooms. The floorboards creaked under my weight, but something heavier followed behind me. A soft, dragging sound, like boots moving over packed snow. Each time I reached a door, I swore I saw frost forming around the frame, slowly spreading, as if the cabin itself was freezing in anticipation. And then I heard it. A low, guttural hum coming from the attic. The sound was alive, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through my chest. I froze at the attic door, hand trembling over the handle. The hum grew louder, almost pleading. My pulse was deafening, drowning out every other sound. I couldn't see anything beyond the narrow stairwell, but the shadows seemed to stretch down toward me, reaching like black fingers. Mark appeared at the bottom of the stairs, eyes wide, pointing behind me. I spun around. The living room had changed. The fireplace was out. The warm, cozy glow replaced with a sickly green light emanating from nowhere. My friends were standing motionless, heads tilted unnaturally, staring at the ceiling. I shouted, demanded they move, shake it off. But their lips barely moved. Their eyes were blank, unseeing. The figure outside the window had multiplied. Dozens of them now, all dressed in old-fashioned clothing, surrounding the cabin silently, reflected in the frosted glass. Panic surged through me. Midnight was approaching. The cabin remembered, and we were the new guests it wanted to keep. I ran to the front door. It wouldn't budge. The lock turned in my hand like it had been fused shut. I banged on it, screamed for my friends, but no sound came out. The hum from the attic intensified, vibrating through the wood floors. I could feel the cold pressing in, like ice creeping along my spine. Mark grabbed my arm, but he wasn't himself. His grip was rigid, mechanical, almost unnatural. His eyes glowed faintly green, like the figures outside, and he whispered in a voice that wasn't quite his own. "It's almost time." I tore free, heart hammering, and ran toward the windows. Frost had spread halfway across the glass, and the reflections weren't ours. Our faces were older, decayed, smiling politely, eyes hollow. Then I noticed the attic hatch slowly creaking open, though no one had touched it. A cold draft rolled down the stairs, carrying the whispers. "Welcome to your first New Year's Eve with us." I backed away from the windows, heart racing. The hum was now deafening, resonating in my chest. Each second closer to midnight made the cabin pulse with anticipation. I could hear soft footsteps above me, though I knew no one had gone up yet. The forest outside seemed to lean closer, the snow shifting as if moved by invisible hands. Figures in old-fashioned clothing pressed against the windows, their eyes bright green, lips twitching as if they were trying to speak. Their faces were twisted into expressions that were almost human, but utterly wrong. I ran to the kitchen, grabbing a knife for protection, though I knew it would do nothing. My friends were frozen, staring at the ceiling again. The attic door was wide open now, a dark void swallowing the staircase with a faint green glow seeping down. The whispers became words, clear and menacing. "Stay, stay. Your time is ours." I realized then that the cabin didn't just trap people. It fed on fear, counting it down until the final second. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly toward midnight. Each second sounded louder than the last, echoing through the frozen cabin like a drum of doom. The green glow from the attic pulsed with the rhythm of my racing heart. I couldn't think. I could barely breathe. Suddenly, Mark's head snapped toward me. His voice, or whatever voice it was, hissed. "You can still leave, if you run now." I bolted toward the back door, dragging my shaking legs over the icy floor. But the door led not to the snowy forest, but to another version of the living room. The fireplace was dead, the hum deafening, and the shadows stretched impossibly long across the walls. I tried to turn back, but the stairwell to the attic was now filled with faintly glowing figures, climbing slowly, silently like a tide of green-eyed ghosts. They paused halfway, staring at me with expressions of patience and hunger. I realized then there was only one chance: to escape through the one window that hadn't yet frozen completely. I scrambled to the window, freezing frost nipping at my fingers. I forced it open, snow blowing inside, icy wind cutting through my jacket. Outside, the forest seemed alive. The snow shimmered unnaturally, and dozens of glowing eyes blinked from between the trees. The figures from the cabin had multiplied, surrounding the cabin silently, reflected in the icy glass. My friends remained frozen inside, their faces pale, eyes glowing faintly green. I realized they were already part of the cabin, trapped in its memory, existing only to witness the next guest's fear. I took a deep breath, ignoring the whispers that now seemed to be all around me. "Midnight, yours. Almost." I jumped. Snow swallowed me. The wind tore at my coat. I didn't look back. I ran blindly toward the main road, leaving the cabin behind. But I knew, even as I disappeared into the dark forest, that it remembered me. The hum faded, but its promise lingered. It would wait every New Year's Eve for the next visitor. I ran through the forest, snow crunching under my boots, every branch clawing at my jacket. My breath came in ragged gasps. The whispering followed me, carried on the wind. Almost midnight, almost yours. I stumbled over a root and fell hard, snow covering my face. When I looked up, the cabin was gone, or at least what I remembered as the cabin. In its place was an empty lot, snow untouched, the trees undisturbed, the warm glow, the green light, the glowing eyes, all vanished. But the sense of being watched lingered. My friends were gone. They hadn't followed me. And then I heard it. A faint hum, low and melodic, coming from deep within the forest. Not the hum of wind, not a distant animal, but something deliberate, patient, eternal. The cabin was somewhere out there, shifting through the forest, waiting for the next group of people to invite inside, to count down the hours until midnight. I staggered to my feet and ran until my lungs burned, knowing I would never return. I finally reached the main road, exhausted, frozen, heart pounding. A car passed by, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I waved frantically, and they stopped, letting me in. As I sat shivering in the warmth, I glanced back toward the forest. The lot was still empty, the snow pristine, no cabin, no figures, only the wind whispering faintly through the trees, carrying a single chilling phrase, "We'll remember and wait." I never spoke of that night again. I never returned to Northern Ontario. Every New Year's Eve, I locked myself inside, listening to the faintest hints of wind, imagining the cabin waiting, counting, gathering strength. Sometimes, when the clock strikes 11:59, I swear I can see faint green lights flickering at the edge of the forest, just beyond where reality ends. The cabin remembers. It always remembers. And one day, it will come for those who think they are safe. My name is Lena Foster, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2019, in downtown Montreal. The city was alive with lights, fireworks, and celebrations. Crowds packed the streets, everyone eager to welcome the new year. I was with my friends, navigating the chaos, when I noticed him. A man standing alone near a barricade, dressed in a dark overcoat, face obscured by a scarf and hat. He didn't seem drunk, didn't celebrate. He just watched the crowd, moving his head slowly as if tracking everyone's pulse. Something about him unnerved me. Even among thousands, he seemed to radiate silence, like he didn't belong in the noise. I dismissed it at first, assuming he was just another partygoer who liked to watch. But then, as midnight approached, I realized he was following us. Not too close, just enough to always be in my peripheral vision. Every step we took, he mirrored. Every turn we made, he appeared at the next corner. And when the countdown began, I noticed the pattern. He was smiling, not a happy smile, something sharper, colder, waiting. The crowd pressed tighter as the seconds ticked toward midnight. I tried to ignore him, focusing on my friends and the excitement around me. But the man stayed exactly the same distance behind us, no one else noticing him. His eyes, though partly hidden, gleamed faintly, catching every reflection of the city lights. I tried to shake the feeling of dread building in my chest, but my stomach twisted as I realized he wasn't just following us. He was counting. Every step, every blink, synced with the collective countdown in the crowd. 10, 9. I glanced at him. His smile widened with each number. I wanted to leave, to break away. But the crowd was dense, and moving fast in any direction seemed impossible. I whispered to my friends, but they didn't notice him. Or maybe they couldn't. When the final seconds of the old year approached, the stranger raised his hand, faintly shaking a small, ancient-looking pocket watch. The metallic ticking was audible over the fireworks. The seconds slipped away. The crowd chanted, 3, 2, 1. Fireworks igniting all around us, but I barely noticed. My eyes were glued to him, the stranger, standing perfectly still, watching me with that unnerving smile. Then, as the city erupted in cheers, he moved closer. Not quickly, not in a rush, but deliberately, step by step, weaving through the crowd without anyone noticing. It was as if the people parted automatically for him. My pulse quickened. My friends were oblivious, caught up in the celebration, laughing and hugging. I felt a cold wave roll over me, a sense of suffocating presence. Something in the stranger's posture screamed threat. The watch in his hand continued ticking, each sound distinct and unnatural, cutting through the city's noise. I realized he wasn't celebrating the new year. He was marking the time until something, or someone, arrived. Fear rooted me to the spot as the green gleam in his eyes grew brighter, reflecting the fireworks in a way that felt alive, almost hungry. I tried to pull my friends away, urging them to leave, but they laughed it off, brushing my concern aside. I could feel it. He was closing in, silent and patient, never breaking the rhythm of the countdown. The crowd's jubilation seemed to highlight his unnatural stillness. Then the world shifted for a split second. The crowd's noise dulled, the fireworks muffled, and I could hear only the ticking of the pocket watch. Each tick made my chest tighten. The stranger's smile widened impossibly, and I saw movement behind him. A shadow stretching across the street, elongated, writhing, almost like smoke. The green glow in his eyes intensified. My stomach turned. I realized the shadow wasn't separate. It was attached to him, moving with his every step, creeping toward me without regard for anything else. I tried to run, but my legs felt heavy, as though the snow beneath my feet and the air itself were holding me back. Midnight had passed, but I was still trapped in his countdown. I finally broke free from the crowd, dragging my friends with me, but the stranger was already closer. He moved like he didn't need to push through anyone, like the crowd parted around him automatically. The green glow in his eyes pulsed with each tick of the watch, synchronized with my own racing heartbeat. We turned a corner, hoping to lose him in the alleyways, but the shadows moved first. The writhing, smoke-like tendril that followed him now stretched across the street, curling around lampposts, slipping over signs, following our every move. My friends began to panic, finally noticing that something was wrong. But the fear in their eyes couldn't match mine. I realized with a sickening clarity that the stranger wasn't human. His movements, his presence, even the unnatural stillness between his steps were all wrong. And the shadow. It was alive, feeding on our panic, growing heavier, closer, waiting to claim the first heartbeat it could touch. I tried to scream, but the words froze in my throat as the watch ticked and ticked and ticked. The alley narrowed, walls closing in. I glanced back. The stranger's figure filled the entire end of the street, perfectly still, yet advancing impossibly fast. The green glow in his eyes reflected in the snow, casting flickering light across the walls like malicious lanterns. The shadow detached from him slightly, wriggling like a living thing, seeping into the cracks in the walls and even into the snow beneath our feet. Every instinct screamed for me to run faster, but my legs felt cemented, unresponsive. He raised his hand, and the pocket watch ticked louder, each metallic sound slicing through the cold night air. The glow of the city seemed to dim around him, leaving us in a circle of green-tinted darkness. My friends were sobbing now, realizing this wasn't a prank, wasn't a drunk man. It was something else. I swallowed hard. My mind raced for an escape, a plan, anything. But the stranger only smiled, patient, waiting, counting down again. 5, 4. I darted toward a side street, desperate for an escape, dragging my friends with me. The snow crunched beneath our boots, the city lights flickering through the swirling snowfall. But the stranger remained at the alley's end, his green eyes glowing brighter than ever, reflecting every flare of fireworks above. Then I saw it. The shadow no longer just followed him. It stretched toward us, crawling over walls, slipping across the ground, twisting in ways that defied physics. It reached the edge of my coat, and a wave of icy dread shot through me. My friend screamed, finally realizing the danger, but the world felt slow, heavy, like we were trapped in syrup. The stranger lifted his hand again, and the metallic tick of the watch echoed in my skull. 3, 2. The numbers weren't for the crowd. They were for us. Each tick was measured, deliberate, marking how much fear remained before we would be claimed. I knew one thing for certain. We had seconds to act or be lost. The side street ended at a dead end. Panic surged through me as the shadow reached closer, curling along the walls and the snow, tendrils seeking flesh. My friends pressed against each other, frozen in terror. I could feel it. It thrived on fear, growing heavier with every heartbeat. I glanced at the stranger again. His smile had become a grin, sharp and cruel. The pocket watch glinted in the snowlight. The ticking seemed to synchronize with my own pulse, a rhythm I couldn't escape. Then, in a desperate act, I grabbed a fire extinguisher from a nearby shop window display and sprayed toward the shadow. It hissed, recoiling slightly, the green glow flickering. The stranger's grin faltered for a fraction of a second. That was all the time I needed. I grabbed my friends and bolted back toward the main street. The snow and the crowd swallowed us, hiding us from view. But I knew, deep down, that he hadn't stopped counting. And the shadow would be back, waiting for the next New Year's Eve. We finally merged back into the crowd, panting, shivering, hearts hammering like wild drums. The city's chaos swallowed us. Fireworks exploding, people cheering, music blasting from speakers. But I couldn't relax. I knew he was still out there. Somewhere. Waiting. The shadow had vanished for now, but I could feel its presence lingering in the corners of my vision. Every streetlight seemed to flicker in rhythm with the ticking of the pocket watch, as if the city itself had become a clock counting down for him. My friends tried to joke, to brush it off as paranoia, but I couldn't. Something had followed us into the crowd, unseen, patient, counting every fearful heartbeat. I glanced back one final time and thought I saw him at a rooftop's edge, standing perfectly still, watching, green eyes glowing faintly. The watch gleamed in his hand. He was smiling, waiting for next year, for the next countdown, for the next person who thought the celebration was safe. Even after we got back to the hotel, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had followed us. The city's warmth felt thin, fragile, like it couldn't hold back the darkness forever. I lay awake in my bed, listening to distant fireworks. But all I could hear was the ticking, ticking, ticking of that watch inside my mind. I never saw him again, not in Montreal, not on any other New Year's Eve. But the memory stayed, vivid, unrelenting. Every time the calendar rolls over, I feel that pulse of dread, the reminder that the stranger is still out there, still counting, waiting for the next moment someone dares to celebrate. The strangest part? I can still feel the shadow sometimes, brushing against my shoulder in a crowded street, a faint chill on my neck. He hasn't claimed me yet, but I know it's only a matter of time. And each year, when the clock nears midnight, I hear the faintest whisper echo in my head. 10, 9, 8. My name is Derek Marshall, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2018, near Banff, Alberta. I had rented a small cabin with a group of friends, eager to escape the city and ring in the new year surrounded by snow-covered peaks. The drive up the winding mountain roads was treacherous, the storm thickening as night fell. By the time we reached the cabin, the wind howled and snow swirled around the roof like ghostly fingers. Inside, the fireplace crackled, offering warmth and comfort against the bitter chill. We ate, drank, and laughed, oblivious to the forest pressing against the windows. But by 11 p.m., unease settled in. Strange noises echoed outside, branches snapping, heavy boots crunching over fresh snow, but no one was visible in the blizzard. Then I saw it. A figure, tall, cloaked in frost, standing at the tree line, watching. Not moving, not breathing, just waiting. The icy wind carried a faint whisper, chilling me to the bone. Time is almost frozen. By 11:30 p.m., the cabin's atmosphere shifted. Shadows inside stretched unnaturally, dancing along the walls with the flicker of the fireplace. The figure outside hadn't moved, yet its presence seemed to grow, pressing against the glass, bending reality around it. I tried to shake off the fear, joking with my friends, but the laughter died in my throat. Footsteps echoed around the cabin, light, deliberate, and always behind me. When I looked back, nothing was there. But the snow outside had changed. The figure now stood closer, and its breath, misting in the cold air, seemed to form words. Frozen. Frozen. Every instinct screamed to leave. But the roads were treacherous, snow piled high, wind gusts strong enough to throw a car off the cliff. The storm outside wasn't natural. It was alive, guided by something waiting to claim the night. I realized we weren't just isolated, we were trapped. And the countdown to midnight was not just the year ending. It was a warning. As midnight approached, the storm intensified. The wind howled through the trees like a chorus of tortured souls. I could feel the frost creeping along the window frames, spreading inside as if the cabin itself were freezing in response to something outside. Every shadow seemed alive, writhing across the walls with a sinister rhythm. I tried to rally my friends, to convince them to help me secure the doors and windows, but they were frozen in place, eyes wide with terror. Something about the figure outside seemed to mesmerize them, an unearthly pull that rooted them to the floor. I took a step toward the door and froze. Footprints had appeared in the snow around the cabin, forming a perfect circle, leading from the tree line to the front steps. And at the center the figure stood, staring directly at me. Its eyes glowed faintly green, icy and unfeeling, reflecting the firelight like shards of frozen glass. A voice, barely a whisper, yet audible over the storm, said, "Midnight is almost here, and your time is frozen." I tried to move, to break the spell, but my legs wouldn't respond. The fire flickered violently, throwing grotesque shadows that seemed to reach for me. My friends remained still, faces pale, lips slightly parted, as if murmuring along with the wind. The figure outside lifted its hand. Snow swirled around it, forming strange runes in the air, glowing faintly in green and icy white. The wind carried its whispers, repeating, "Frozen, frozen, frozen," over and over, until it echoed inside my skull. I realized the cabin itself was alive, amplifying the figure's power. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the icy heartbeat of the forest outside. Every crack in the floorboards and creaking beam became a message, a warning. We were being watched, counted, and measured. The tree line shimmered, and I could see more shapes. Shadowy figures emerging, circling silently in the snow. Waiting for the moment we would be completely frozen in fear, I forced myself to move, dragging my friends toward the door. But the storm outside had grown impossibly strong, wind cutting through the cracks in the cabin, carrying the figures whispering. Almost frozen. Almost yours. Each word felt like ice piercing my bones. The footprints outside had multiplied, forming intricate patterns in the snow as if the figure was preparing some ritual. I could see faint outlines of more frost-covered figures emerging from the tree line, their eyes glowing green, perfectly still yet advancing in unison. The snow seemed to bend toward them, forming unnatural drifts around the cabin. We tried the door. It wouldn't budge. The lock felt fused, frozen in place. Panic took over. I slammed my shoulder into it, again and again, until it cracked slightly, letting in a gust of icy air that carried the smell of frozen earth and decay. The wind howled with voices, and I realized the storm wasn't natural. It was alive, controlled by them, counting down to midnight, ready to claim anyone still inside. I turned toward the windows, hoping for another exit, but frost had spread halfway across the glass. The silhouettes of the figures outside were reflected inside, growing taller, stretching unnaturally, like the cabin itself was warping around them. The green glow from their eyes made the interior look like a frozen nightmare. The fire flickered low, and shadows moved independently of the flames, twisting across the walls with sinister intent. I grabbed my friends' hands and tried to pull them to the back door, but they were paralyzed, eyes wide with uncomprehending fear. The tallest figure outside raised its hand, and the snow swirled in a vortex, forming ghostly shapes, faces frozen in screams, hovering around the cabin like spirits in waiting. I realized, in horror, that the cabin wasn't just a shelter. It was the anchor for their power. Midnight wasn't just a time. It was a threshold. And they were here to cross it, dragging anyone who lingered with them into the frozen void. I bolted toward the back door, snow crunching under my boots, but the cold hit me like a wall. My breath froze midair, mist curling around my face. The figures outside had multiplied, now forming a perfect semicircle around the cabin, their glowing green eyes fixed on every movement we made. My friends were trembling, muttering incoherently, unable to tear their eyes from the windows. I could feel the cabin itself shaking slightly, the timbers groaning as if alive, amplifying the presence outside. The tallest figure raised its hand again, and the snow shifted, forming jagged patterns on the ground, like runes etched in frozen blood. I realized the storm, the frost, the shadows. They were all part of it. The countdown was reaching its peak, and the longer we stayed, the more permanent our fate would become. Every second toward midnight was measured, precise, deliberate, and merciless. I clenched my fists, knowing that if we wanted to survive, we had to act now. Before the final bell rang, the back door finally gave way with a shudder, letting in a blast of icy wind that cut through me. Outside, the snow swirled violently, the green-eyed figures standing like statues in the blizzard, their outlines blurred yet terrifyingly precise. I grabbed my friend's hands and ran, lungs burning, boots slipping in the deep snow. The forest around the cabin seemed alive, trees bending toward us, branches curling like skeletal fingers. The figures moved silently through the storm, never running, but closing the distance impossibly fast. Every crunch of snow beneath our feet echoed like a drumbeat, counting down toward something far worse than midnight. I dared a glance back and saw the tallest figure raise the pocket watch it now held in its frost-covered hand. The ticking was louder now, dominating every sound in the storm. Its glow pulsed in perfect rhythm with my own terrified heartbeat. There was no doubt. The frozen countdown was reaching its final, inevitable moment. The back door finally gave way with a shudder, letting in a blast of icy wind that cut through me. Outside, the snow swirled violently, the green-eyed figures standing like statues in the blizzard, their outlines blurred yet terrifyingly precise. I grabbed my friend's hands and ran, lungs burning, boots slipping in the deep snow. The forest around the cabin seemed alive, trees bending toward us, branches curling like skeletal fingers. The figures moved silently through the storm, never running, but closing the distance impossibly fast. Every crunch of snow beneath our feet echoed like a drumbeat, counting down toward something far worse than midnight. I dared a glance back and saw the tallest figure raise the pocket watch it now held in its frost-covered hand. The ticking was louder now, dominating every sound in the storm. Its glow pulsed in perfect rhythm with my own terrified heartbeat. There was no doubt. The frozen countdown was reaching its final, inevitable moment. We saw lights in the distance, another cabin, or maybe a lodge, flickering warmth in the snowy void. With every ounce of strength, we sprinted toward it, snowdrifts slowing our progress, frost biting at our skin. The figures stayed back, just at the edge of visibility, their eyes glowing like predators tracking prey. As we reached the cabin, slamming the door behind us, the storm outside seemed to pause. The ticking of the watch faded, leaving only silence. My friends collapsed, shivering and sobbing, while I pressed my ear to the door, half expecting the frozen ones to strike through. The next morning, the snow outside was undisturbed. No footprints, no figures, nothing. But we all knew the truth. The frozen countdown had almost claimed us, marking our fear in ways we couldn't explain. And every New Year's Eve since, I feel the cold creeping in, a reminder that the figures are patient. They wait. They always wait. And they are counting. My name is Sophie Delaney, and this happened on New Year's Eve, 2020, in Toronto, Ontario. I was spending the evening alone in my apartment, curled up with a blanket, planning to watch the city fireworks from my balcony. My friends were all out celebrating, leaving me with a rare, quiet night. Around 11:30 p.m., my phone rang. The number was unknown, and a chill ran down my spine as I answered. The voice on the other end was distorted, whispering just above a hiss, "Midnight is closer than you think, and I'm watching." I laughed nervously, assuming it was a prank call. But then the lights in my apartment flickered, and I heard faint tapping against the glass doors leading to the balcony. My heart began to pound. The voice continued, repeating phrases I couldn't quite make out, each word seeping into my bones, filling me with dread. Something about the way it spoke, the rhythm, the cadence, was too deliberate, too patient. It wasn't just a caller. It was waiting. I tried to ignore it, putting the phone down and telling myself it was just someone messing with me. But the tapping grew louder, deliberate, measured, like someone pacing on the balcony, circling slowly. Every time I moved toward the door, it stopped. Every time I turned away, it started again. I checked the locks. They were secure, yet my stomach twisted with fear. The voice on the phone returned, whispering my name now, clear and deliberate. "Sophie, don't turn around. Not yet." My apartment felt suddenly smaller, the shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls, crawling toward me. The city outside continued to celebrate, oblivious to the creeping terror inside my home. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands shaking, and edged toward the balcony, each step measured, heart hammering. The voice laughed softly this time, low and cruel. as if it knew exactly what I was thinking and exactly what I would do next. I pressed my back against the wall, keeping the knife ready, trying to convince myself the figure outside was just a trick of the light. But the tapping continued. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate. My phone buzzed again, displaying a message from the unknown number. I can see you. I'm closer than you think. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I glanced at the balcony and saw a faint silhouette move across the glass just beyond the fog. The figure didn't rush, didn't make noise except for that persistent tapping. Its presence seemed to distort the air, warping the shadows inside the apartment. I tried calling the police, but the line was dead. My neighbors' apartments were lit, but the noise of the city seemed muted, distant, as if the world outside had vanished. Every instinct screamed to leave, but my body froze. Something about this caller wasn't human. Its patience, its precision, the way it seemed to anticipate every move I made. I realized then that my New Year's Eve celebration had become a countdown I couldn't escape. The minutes crawled toward midnight, each second heavier than the last. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears over the distant fireworks. The tapping escalated, now accompanied by soft scraping, as if fingers were tracing lines across the glass. I swallowed hard and took a step forward. The figure outside didn't move. It merely watched, patiently, the greenish glow from its eyes faintly illuminating the fogged balcony glass. The voice returned on the phone, whispering, 10 seconds. 9. 8. I froze. The words were synchronized with a faint ticking in my skull. A countdown I couldn't stop. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to think. I needed a plan, any plan, to survive this New Year's Eve nightmare. Then the balcony door handle rattled lightly. My breath caught in my throat. The figure wasn't just outside. It was testing the barrier, waiting for the exact moment when the countdown would end and the threshold would open. I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the balcony handle, my hands shaking violently. The tapping continued, now faster, more insistent, as if the figure knew my every move. My friends weren't there to help. I was alone, entirely alone, facing something that didn't belong in this world. The phone buzzed again. The screen displayed a live video feed from my own balcony. I froze, staring at myself through the fogged glass, knife in hand, terror written across my face. The figure's distorted reflection lingered behind me, though I hadn't seen it there. My pulse raced as I realized it had crossed some invisible barrier. It didn't need to enter to reach me. The whisper returned, softer now but deadly deliberate. 3, 2, 1. The countdown wasn't about midnight. It was about me. Every second compressed into a single heartbeat of fear. I felt my chest tighten, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out from the terror. Then a loud bang from outside made me jump, shattering part of the glass in my panic. Heart hammering, I stepped back from the door, knife raised. The shards of glass on the floor glittered like ice under the city lights. The snow outside had begun falling heavier, dusting the balcony and reflecting the green glow of the figure's eyes. The phone buzzed again, and I flinched at the message. Time's up. My chest felt frozen, every instinct screaming to run, yet I couldn't move. The figure didn't enter. It didn't need to. Its presence warped the air, twisted the shadows, and reached into my mind. Then I noticed movement inside the reflection on the balcony glass, shapes twisting and writhing behind the figure, shadows that shouldn't exist. A low, guttural whisper echoed from the glass itself. Happy New Year, Sophie. Panic overtook me. I backed away from the balcony, tripping over the chair, nearly falling onto the floor. I realized that the figure had claimed the threshold without touching me, and that tonight I had survived only by seconds, not luck. I stumbled across the apartment, my mind racing. The lights flickered as though responding to the figure's presence, stretching shadows into monstrous shapes across the walls. Every reflection, every dark corner, seemed to hold something watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The green glow outside pulsed faintly, synchronized with the pounding of my heart. I grabbed my laptop, hoping for some connection to call for help. But the screen displayed something impossible. Live footage of my apartment from angles I didn't even know existed. In the reflection, the figure was no longer on the balcony. It was inside, in every corner, in every shadow, lingering behind me. Its green eyes followed me wherever I moved. The whisper returned, soft but unmistakable. "You cannot hide. Not from me. Not tonight." The sound reverberated in my skull, distorting the air around me. I knew then that no barrier, door, lock, or window would protect me. The midnight caller wasn't just a visitor. It was a predator, patient, intelligent, and unrelenting. The minutes crawled closer to midnight. I could hear the distant fireworks outside, faint echoes of celebration. But inside the apartment, time had warped. Every second stretched painfully, as if the figure was bending reality around me. My hands shook violently as I tried to find any object to defend myself. Suddenly, the balcony door creaked. Not forcefully, just a slow, deliberate nudge, testing me, teasing me, daring me to look. My breath caught. The green glow intensified, flickering across the balcony floor like liquid light. I gripped the knife tighter, telling myself not to turn my back. Then, without warning, the lights went out completely. Absolute darkness, except for the eerie green glow seeping through the glass. A whisper floated into my ears, chilling me to the bone. 1. Midnight. It wasn't a countdown for the city, it was for me. Every hair on my body stood on end as I realized that the moment had arrived. Midnight struck, and for a moment, everything froze. The fireworks outside sounded muffled, distorted, like they were underwater. My apartment was filled with a silence so thick it pressed against my ears. Then I heard it. The whispering, multiplied, surrounding me, coming from every shadow, every corner, every reflective surface. I stumbled backward, knife raised, heart hammering. The green glow intensified. No longer confined to the balcony, it seeped across the floor, crawling along the walls, twisting shadows into grotesque shapes that mirrored the figure's features. The reflection in the glass wasn't just one figure anymore. It was a dozen, all staring at me with empty, glowing eyes. My pulse raced as the whisper repeated, "You belong to the night." To me, I realized, with horror, that this caller wasn't bound by space or glass. It had infiltrated my apartment, my mind, my reality. My breath froze, hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the knife. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. I backed into the corner, pressing myself against the wall, paralyzed with terror. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me completely, overlapping in a maddening chorus. Forever. 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 The green eyes advanced, stretching, merging with the shadows, twisting the very air around me. Then, silence. The glow vanished, the shadows collapsed, and the whispers faded. My chest heaved, sweat and tears mixing, and I realized I was still alive. The apartment was empty, normal, untouched. Yet I knew the figure hadn't left. It was waiting, patient, eternal. The countdown had ended, but it was only a pause, not a victory. I haven't been alone on a New Year's Eve since. Every time my phone rings from an unknown number, my pulse spikes. Every shadow in my apartment makes me flinch. And every year, I wonder, will I see the green eyes again on my balcony, waiting for the next midnight? The caller is always out there, watching, waiting, counting. The darkness you've seen tonight is not confined to these stories. It creeps silently through snowy forests, icy cabins, and even the bustling streets of the city. These are not tales to dismiss. These are true experiences, real encounters that leave scars on the mind and chill the soul. As the new year begins, remember that the shadows are always watching, waiting, counting every heartbeat. Fear does not rest, and neither does the darkness. Keep your lights on, guard your windows, and trust nothing you see alone in the night. Thank you for watching these 7 most disturbing true Canadian New Year's Eve horror stories. Remember, the terror is real, and it is always closer than you think.